Alright, listen up, because this is one messed up story I gotta share. So, my grandma kicked the bucket a few months back, leaving me with her house. A rambling old Victorian thing filled with more dust bunnies than actual furniture. Last weekend, I decided to tackle the attic, a place that hadn't been touched since, well, probably Grandma herself was a teenager. The air hung thick with the smell of mothballs and forgotten memories. Sifting through boxes overflowing with dusty trinkets and faded photographs, I stumbled upon a treasure trove, a collection of VHS tapes. Hundreds of them, neatly labeled with titles like Mom's Aerobics Class, 1987, and Family Vacation to Disney World, 95. A wave of nostalgia washed over me, a reminder of simpler times spent huddled around the TV with scratchy VHS tapes as our only entertainment. But then, I saw it. A single tape nestled amongst the family comedies, its label stark and unsettling. Final broadcast, Channel 9. Intrigued, I grabbed the tape and headed downstairs. My apartment, thankfully, still sported a functioning VCR, a relic of the past my grandma refused to part with. Popping the tape in, I settled back on the couch, a shiver of anticipation crawling down my spine. The screen flickered to life, displaying the familiar logo of Channel 9, a local news station I barely remembered. A news report was in progress. The anchor, a woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde mane, delivering a cheery weather report. Everything seemed normal. At first. Then, the picture started to distort. Static flickered across the screen, the anchorwoman's smile morphing into a grimace. A blood-curdling scream pierced the speakers, sending a jolt through me. The image cut to a live feed from the newsroom, a scene of utter chaos. Reporters scrambled, cameramen dropped their equipment, all screaming incoherently. A dark, shadowy figure darted across the screen, its form impossible to discern. More screams erupted, followed by the sickening thud of something heavy hitting the floor. The cameraman, his face twisted in terror, pointed the camera towards a doorway. A horde of grotesque, inhuman creatures flooded into the room, their forms writhing and pulsating in the harsh studio lights. The footage devolved into a nightmarish ballet of terror. Reporters were swarmed, their screams abruptly cut short. The cameraman tripped, his desperate pleas swallowed by the cacophony of shrieks and growls. The last shot was a close-up of one of the creatures, its glistening black eyes boring into the camera lens, a horrifying maw lined with razor-sharp teeth snapping mere inches from the lens. The tape abruptly cut to static, the screams replaced by a high-pitched whine. Then, silence. I sat there, staring at the black screen, my heart hammering in my chest. What the hell had I just watched? Was it some elaborate prank, a staged horror movie on an old VHS tape? The terror in the reporters' eyes, the raw panic in their screams. It all felt too real. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I rewound the tape and watched it again. This time, I paid closer attention. The news report itself wasn't dated, but the clothes and hairstyles of the reporters suggested it was from the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. There was nothing online about Channel 9 being overrun by monsters. Shaken but compelled, I delved deeper into the box of tapes. There were more, several labeled with similar cryptic titles. Final transmission, Tokyo Broadcasting System, Emergency Alert, Moscow Central News. Each tape followed the same horrifying pattern. A news broadcast interrupted by chaos, screams, and the arrival of these grotesque entities. The final tape was labeled simply, "Do not watch." Needless to say, that only fueled my morbid curiosity. The tape started like the others, a news broadcast from an unfamiliar station. This time, the reporter wasn't screaming, but speaking with a forced calm, his voice laced with a desperate urgency. "We don't know what these things are," he said, his face pale with terror. "They seem to be coming through the television signals. This is a national emergency. Please, for your own safety, turn off your televisions and stay away from any electronic devices." The image flickered, the reporter's face contorting in pain. A guttural growl filled the speakers. The cameraman swung the camera around, revealing a swarm of the creatures closing in on the reporter. His scream that echoed in the room long after the tape ended. The screen filled with static, then a single, horrifying image. The close-up of one of the creature's glowing red eyes, staring directly at the camera lens. It felt like it was staring right at me, a chilling implication that sent a cold sweat prickling my skin. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, transfixed by the static image on the screen, my mind racing with a horrifying possibility. These creatures, whatever they were, could travel through television signals. And I had just watched them, invited them into my living room through the flickering glow of the old VCR. Panic clawed at my throat. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes darting around the room as if expecting these things to materialize at any moment. The logical part of my brain tried to reason. It was just a tape, a messed up prank at worst. But the terror in the reporter's voice, the raw, primal fear in their screams, it resonated too deeply. I couldn't stay there. The VCR, a once beloved relic, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Grabbing a crowbar from the garage, I marched back into the living room. With trembling hands, I smashed the VCR to pieces, plastic shards raining down onto the floor like a grotesque confetti. The sense of relief was short-lived, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. What if it wasn't enough? What if they were already here, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment? Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window sent shivers down my spine. Dawn brought a sliver of relief, but the underlying fear remained. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I scoured the internet, searching for any mention of Channel 9, the creatures, or the cryptic warnings about television signals. There was nothing. The tapes seemed to exist in a vacuum, a chilling piece of evidence with no context, no explanation. As a precaution, I disconnected every electronic device in the house. The world suddenly felt a million years removed, devoid of the constant hum of information technology. It was isolating, but at the same time, an unsettling peace settled over me. One evening, as I sat by the flickering light of an oil lamp, a deafening crack of thunder split the sky. The lights flickered momentarily, then went out completely. My heart jumped to my throat. This was it. They were coming. The house plunged into darkness. I held my breath, straining to hear any sound beyond the drumming of the rain. Then, a faint light flickered at the edge of my vision. A single red glow, pulsing in the darkness. Panic surged through me. Grabbing a heavy candlestick, I crept towards the source of the light. It emanated from a crack in the wall, a barely visible gap behind a fallen bookshelf. As I drew closer, the glow intensified, accompanied by a faint, unsettling hum. Suddenly, the bookshelf toppled over with a crash. I stumbled back, the candlestick clattering to the floor. In the flickering light, I saw it. A single, glistening black eye staring out from the crack in the wall. A horrifying maw filled with razor-sharp teeth began to emerge. I screamed, a primal cry of terror. But before the creature could fully break through, a blinding flash illuminated the room. The thunder roared again, this time accompanied by a deafening crack. Lightning had struck the house, plunging it back into darkness, but the sound of the creature's frustrated screech echoed in the aftermath. Trembling, I scrambled away from the wall, my mind reeling. The lightning strike, a random act of nature, may have saved me this time. But what about next time? The tapes were a chilling warning, a glimpse into a terrifying world that now seemed terrifyingly real. I live in constant fear now. Every flicker of the lights, every static-filled radio broadcast sends shivers down my spine. The world outside continues on, oblivious to the unseen threat lurking in the digital shadows. I remain vigilant, a keeper of a horrifying secret, forever haunted by the screams on those old VHS tapes and the chilling image of a single, glowing red eye staring out from the darkness. This isn't a world-saving story. It's a story of survival, of clinging to a shred of sanity in a world where the line between fiction and horrifying reality has blurred beyond recognition. The tapes are a warning, a chilling reminder that some things are best left unseen, unheard, and most importantly, unbroadcasted. The experience left me a wreck. Sleep became a battlefield of nightmares, the house a constant source of paranoia. But a strange sense of purpose bloomed amidst the fear. Those tapes, the reporter's final warning, they were meant to be seen, a message sent through the static. I couldn't just cower in the dark. Driven by this newfound resolve, I ventured back into the digital world, but with extreme caution. Old, battery-powered radios became my only companions. I started scouring radio frequencies, searching for any anomaly, any hint of a similar message. Days turned into weeks, filled with static and the occasional crackle of foreign broadcasts. Just as despair began to gnaw at me again, a faint signal flickered to life. It was a woman's voice, barely a whisper amidst the static, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. But the urgency in her tone was unmistakable. Using a combination of online translation tools and educated guesses, I managed to decipher a few chilling phrases. They control the signals. Fight back. Resistance. The broadcast ended abruptly, leaving me with a mix of dread and hope. This wasn't just some isolated incident. There were others out there, fighting back against these creatures that traveled through the airwaves. I didn't know who they were or where they were, but for the first time since the tapes, I felt a sliver of connection, a sense that I wasn't alone in this. I spent the next few weeks deciphering the woman's message, piecing together fragments of information. They called themselves the Signal Breakers, a loose network of tech-savvy individuals dedicated to disrupting the creature's control over electronic signals. Apparently, they had developed a jamming device that could create dead zones, areas where the creatures couldn't manifest. The instructions for building the device were complex, filled with jargon I barely understood. But the desperation in the woman's voice fueled my determination. I spent days scouring electronic stores, learning on the fly, fueled by adrenaline and a thirst for knowledge. Finally, after countless frustrations and a few minor explosions, the device stood before me. A janky mess of wires and circuits, but hopefully, enough to disrupt the creature's grip. The instructions also mentioned a hidden frequency, a beacon used by the signal breakers to communicate. With a pounding heart, I tuned my radio to the designated frequency. Static filled the air, then a voice crackled through. A man, his voice gruff but reassuring. He explained the network's operation, how they used dead zones to create safe havens and shared information about the creature's weaknesses.